Hi everybody, my name is Terri and welcome to my channel The Pink Dumbbell Problem and a new episode in the Friday Fact Day series. This is my little opportunity every week to talk about the work I've been doing in fitness, feminism, and philosophy. And today's fact is: women knowing stuff. So this is part 6 in what has turned into a multi-part, and I don't know how many parts it's going to be, series on the basics of agnotology. So agnotology is a new area of philosophy. It's the area I study in addition to feminist philosophy. Basically, to give you a quick recap if you're new to this concept, agnotology is the study or the theory or the philosophy of ignorance. Not in a negative way of using the word ignorance, but in the sense of how we don't know something and why we don't know something that has been perhaps scientifically proven or historically established. Now, because I combine the two things, agnotology and feminist philosophy, I want to dig into just a little bit of that today. Of course, it's been a while since I've done an agnotology specific video and I'm getting requests, so thank you for that. Here you go. Agnotology, as we currently organize it, breaks down into 3 branches: native state or naive state, in which one simply doesn't know something because they haven't had the opportunity to learn it. Second is the lost realm, which is material that's been quote unquote lost in the mists of time, and some historian's going to have to uncover it. Third, and this is the one I work in the most, is called strategic ploy. And strategic ploy is what happens when things are deliberately manipulated so that we, the people, don't know what's going on. We don't know the real truth behind a story. I'll put a few links down below to my explainers on that and my long video essay using examples from the music industry on how that works. Once again, just like last week, I am going to bring a little bit of the In the Discourse flavor over here to the Friday Fact Day series. I'm kind of mixing my series up a little bit, but that's kind of the way things are going these days. A few days ago, this was posted on Twitter by Natasha Fata. And Natasha Fata is a CBC news anchor here in Canada, and is, as far as I've seen, the only real news person who has been covering this ongoing story. Fata has been posting since last fall on Twitter a whole thread of news items from around the world, not just CBC ones, about the plight of women in Afghanistan now that the Taliban is back in ruling position. Earlier in last year, they had promised that women and girls would be able to still access education, and to absolutely nobody's surprise, a few days ago, they walked that back. I'll throw a link to her Twitter thread down below if you want to check that out for yourself. So what does this have to do with anything? This is an agnotology video because this is very specifically about targeting girls and women and not allowing them access to education. And that's not a new thing, and that's not an Afghanistan thing. That has been happening throughout human history. Because I study how women don't know things, particularly in the fitness world, but also in health in general and sport and physical activity of all kinds, I'm always interested in finding out where the gaps in education have been. And that's ultimately what led me to find and study agnotology in the first place. What that led me to was a bit of historical work, and I'm not a historian, but I play one on YouTube sometimes. The idea of women knowing things has always been historically dicey. It's been something that patriarchal structures have wanted to stamp out, and not letting girls go to school, not letting girls learn to read, that's step 1 of that whole process. By the way, I'll put a link down below for my video from a few months ago on the Matilda Effect and the Semmelweis Effect, because those also are examples of some of this process. We can look at things like the fact that women have only been allowed into most medical schools in the last century. And see, it's not that far back that the idea of women having access to knowledge, and particularly of scientific knowledge, has been deemed impossible in the lifetimes of a lot of people that are still alive. To give you a more personal frame of reference, when my mom was in high school, girls weren't allowed to take chemistry. I'm not going to tell you what years that was because she'll murder me. But she's still alive, so it's not that far back in human history. It's in living memory. All of this creates a situation in which girls and women don't know scientific knowledge, anatomy knowledge, medical knowledge, sport and fitness and physical activity knowledge. Therefore, girls aren't smart enough. Becomes a very easy piece of narrative of social norms and common knowledge. By the way, if anybody ever tells you something is common knowledge, back away. Because to put words in the mouth of the character Linda Richman from Saturday Night Live. She never really said this, but common knowledge is neither common nor knowledge. Discuss. So those gaps in access have been created. That leads to a common knowledge understanding that women are not capable. And that leads to a lot of having to fight down the road to get women into those positions. I remember as a young person growing up, the first time we had a woman doctor in my hometown, and it upset a lot of people. And there was a lot of people who were not convinced that she could do the job, figured that, she was some kind of diversity seat in her med school, and that was the only reason she got her medical degrees. So that sounds a little weird today, but again, not that far back in the grand scheme of human history. To go back to agnotology, all of this is strategic ploy. Things like sexism and patriarchy are not accidental. They're planned and they're executed intentionally. Not every person who commits sexist or patriarchal or misogynistic behavior is necessarily doing it consciously. Going back even further in history, and I'll point to some E here, Aaron Reich and English, two of my absolute favorites, especially when they write together. Look at the history of things like midwives being outlawed. Their work all got transferred over to men who were medical doctors, because of course women weren't allowed to be. And suddenly, women aren't smart enough to be doctors because we outlawed them from being so. So you have to dig through all the layers. And as my first ever women's studies prof used to say, follow the money. Because of course, money couldn't be made by midwives. It had to be made by medical doctors. None of this stuff is accidental. It's all strategic. The same goes for the other isms, racism, classism, ableism, you name it. Any of those things are structured and intentional at some level way back in history. It doesn't take that much work or even that much time for these things to become common knowledge. And suddenly we believe that women aren't capable of learning science or taking chemistry in high school or becoming doctors, or that they can't learn to throw a ball accurately, or they can't play most sports. And then we end up with this sort of snowball effect where people don't believe that it's possible, and somebody has to then break through these barriers and prove, yes, it's possible. Yes, girls can do push-ups. Like, just ask one. It's not that hard to find. When people ask me how it is that agnotology and gender studies or feminist philosophy work together, this is how it is. You have to always understand that sexism doesn't happen by accident. None of the isms do. There may not be necessarily one exact moment or one exact creator of the ignorance that's being peddled. We call those exact moments of ignorance being created the agnogenesis. So we don't always know the exact moment of agnogenesis of a given story, but you can usually trace things back. Somebody somewhere wrote something down and kept some kind of record that if scientists and historians and philosophers dig through enough dirt, we will find it. And ultimately, that's what doing agnotology really is. It's, peeking under the rug and seeing what dirt's been swept under there and shining a light on it. The other thing, just quickly, that I often get asked is all agnotology feminist? And certainly in its roots, it is. Certainly in the early several years of the work that's been done in agnotology, it absolutely has been. But it's branching out in different directions. And really, it's something that can be applied to really any area of study, any discipline. While the two aren't always the same thing, they are definitely deeply connected. I don't know if I can say feminism was the mother or the parent of agnotology, but it's definitely the cool auntie. I think it's pretty hard to not be feminist and intersectional and anti-racist and so on with agnotology work, because you are, again, looking for those narratives that are considered the norms of society and going, I don't think that's right. I've seen people who can do what everybody says they can't. I better go dig around and find the origin of that. Ultimately, it is interdisciplinary. Once again, I should probably do a video on what interdisciplinary and all of those other academic terms means, but I'll get to that later. And it's not a discipline necessarily in its own right, although I think it's going to evolve into that over time in the next few years, maybe. With so much misinformation and disinformation in the media, it's become more useful than ever before. So it is always influenced and always a useful tool for all of the studies for marginalized groups. So gender studies and queer theory and race theory and disability studies. I mean, these are all new disciplines that have come up in the last couple of decades, and agnotology can play a part in any of them. It doesn't own those things, and none of them own it, But, as I've said before, they go together beautifully. It's like peanut butter and chocolate. They're great on their own, but so much better together. Just a quick one this week, and I will see you next week as well as usual. Please click down below, subscribe, do some clicking on some other videos, check out my Threadless store, all that good stuff. And as always, lift heavy, fight the patriarchy, and I'll see you next time. Bye. I swear these Agnotology videos are just an excuse for me to eat peanut butter cups.